I charge the white man with being the greatest gambler on earth. I charge the white man, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, with being the greatest murderer on earth. I charge the white man with being the greatest peace breaker on earth. I charge the white man with being the greatest adulterer on earth. I charge the white man with being the greatest robber on earth. I charge the white man with being the greatest deceiver on earth. I charge the white man with being the greatest troublemaker on earth. So therefore, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I ask you, bring back a verdict of guilty as charged.
In the late 1950s, the civil rights movement was still in its early stages, and leaders like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had just begun to gain national recognition. However, for many Black Americans, the promises of equality and justice felt like distant dreams. It was in these moments of frustration and disillusionment that the Nation of Islam began to spread rapidly. The organization offered a radical alternative to the nonviolent strategies championed by mainstream civil rights leaders, which was led by Elijah Muhammad. The nation's message was clear: self-reliance, Black pride, and a complete rejection of white America's authority. The Nation of Islam aims to challenge the racial status quo and overturn it entirely. Elijah Muhammad's teachings described white people as oppressors and villains. To its followers, the nation offered a sense of dignity and empowerment. To its non-followers, it was a dangerous ideology of hate.
Everyone who is here today realizes that we are now living in the fulfillment of prophecy. Right. We have come to hear and to see the greatest and the wisest and most fearless Black man in America today. In the church, we used to sing the song, "Good news, the chariot is coming." Is that right or wrong? But what we must bear in mind, that what's good news to one person is bad news to another. While you sit here today, knowing that you have come to hear good news, you must realize in advance what's good news for you might be bad news for somebody else. What's good news for the sheep might be bad news to the wolf.
The good news for the black man is that he is on the verge of recapturing his position as ruler of the universe. The bad news for the white man is that his long and wicked reign will shortly be over. And following this introduction, Elijah Muhammad, leader of the Muslims, speaks.
The Christian religion has failed. Your leaders of that religion has failed. Now the government of America has failed you. You have no justice coming from no one. Whereas it is written, like sheep among wolves. Every wolf taken up by it. You want justice. You want freedom. You want equality.
The platform that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, our religious leader, stands upon is the platform of complete freedom, justice, and equality for the 20 million black people, or so-called Negroes here in America. And he teaches us that because of the seriousness of the condition that our people now find themselves in, that it's absolutely impossible to solve our problems with means other than religion. And he teaches us that the religion of Islam is the only religion that will instill within our people the incentive to stand on our own feet, and instead of trying to force ourselves upon whites or force ourselves into the white society or blame the white man for our predicament and constantly beg him for what he has, he says that the only way that we can solve our problem is to unite together among ourselves, among our own kind, clean ourselves up, rid ourselves of the evils that we've become addicted to here in this society, and try and solve our problem ourselves.
Then I referred to the popular belief that the Muslims preach a hatred for the white race. You do not subscribe to this, then?
No, I've never heard the Honorable Elijah Muhammad teach or preach hatred for anyone. He preaches hatred against evil, against drunkenness, against dope addiction, against poverty, and against having to beg for the things that a man is supposed to have. But I've never heard him teach us or any of his followers hatred toward any human being.
Do you think that some of his followers possibly then have misinterpreted the word that they've heard and follow a practice of hatred for the white race?
I don't think that any Muslim practices hatred toward anyone. We have businesses around the country that are patronized by whites, and we have many businesses here in Chicago, and our customers are white as well as our own kind. And a white person can go into any of these places of business, and he'll have to admit that he is treated with more respect, and he finds more dignity there than he will find among the so-called Negroes who profess to be teaching love for everyone.
Muslims who have accepted the religion of Islam and follow the religious guidance of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad have never bombed any churches, have never murdered any little girls, as was done in Birmingham, have never lynched anybody, have never at any time been guilty of initiating any aggressive acts of violence. During the entire 33 years or more that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad has been teaching us, the charge of violence against us actually stems from the guilt complex that exists in the conscious and subconscious minds of most white people in this country. They know that they've been violent in their brutality against Negroes, and they feel that someday the Negro is going to wake up and try and do unto them as they have do unto the whites as the whites have done unto us. We aren't a violent group. We are taught by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad to obey the law, to respect everyone who respects us. We're taught to display courtesy, to be polite, but we're also taught that at any time anyone in any way inflicts or seeks to inflict violence upon us, we are within our religious rights to retaliate in self-defense to the maximum degree of our ability. We never initiate any violence upon anyone, but if anyone attacks us, we reserve the right to defend ourselves. So to accuse us of being violent is like accusing a man who is being lynched, who is being hung on a tree, simply because he struggles vigorously against his lyncher. The victim is accused of violence, but the lyncher is never accused of violence. And I only point this out because the various racist groups that are set up in this country by whites and who have actually practiced violence against blacks for 400 years are never associated or identified or made synonymous with the term violence. But whites speak of Muslims almost synonymously with violence. Whenever Muslims are mentioned by them, violence is brought up, but it's not connected with any other group. This is a sort of a propaganda tactic, or what I would call psychological warfare, to in some way make the image of the Muslims in this country be a violent image rather than a religious image.
I'd like to ask a question in that regard. What's interesting is that members of the Nation of Islam have not used violence even when black Americans were attacked. How do you account for this? Does this in any way contradict some of the basic premises of your movement?
I don't know how you mean.
Well, you maintain, for example, that you will not, or that you should not use violence unless you are attacked by the white man. And I think we can note in the last several years, certainly, dozens and dozens and dozens of instances in which Negroes have been attacked, killed in some instances.
You mean in these demonstrations?
These demonstrations and the bombings, for example, recently in Birmingham, where they killed 4 little Negro girls. And what interests me is the fact is that the Nation of Islam has not done anything to retaliate.
I think you should be happy.
The important thing is, does your lack of action contradict any of your basic principles?
I'll explain it. You should be happy that Muslims who follow the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, number one, don't believe in any form of integration, and who believe that every mention of the word integration by whites, whether it be from the mouth of Kennedy on down to the mouth of the lowest, raggediest white liberal in the street who is beatnik-like involving himself in these integration efforts, if we believed in it, we would integrate, and we would fight anybody who got in our way or made any effort whatsoever to stop us from integrating. If we really believed that the law of the land, the Supreme Court, and other so-called judicial bodies were for real when they talked about integration, we would integrate. And knowing that the law was on our side, and any effort we made to demonstrate toward integration, why, we would know the law should be on our side, if it's the law of the land. If it is the law of the land, then the demonstrators are within the law, and the discriminators are against the law. But to show you the hypocrisy of the law, when Negroes demonstrate for integration, instead of arresting the discriminators, the law arrests the demonstrators. So this is a foolish move on the part of Negroes. And when you foolishly get yourself involved with an enemy, then whatever comes upon you, that's your business. As Muslims, we believe that separation is the best way and the only sensible way, not integration. And but on the other hand, when we see our people being brutalized by white bigots, white racists, we think that they are foolish to allow themselves to be beaten and brutalized and do nothing whatsoever to protect themselves. They are foolish. They should have the right to defend themselves against any attack made against them by anyone. If a dog is biting a black man, the black man should kill the dog. Whether the dog is a police dog, a hound dog, or any kind of dog. If a dog is sick on a black man, when that black man is doing nothing but trying to take advantage of what the government says is supposed to be his, then that black man should kill that dog, or any two-legged dog who sicks the dog on it.
Should other black men help that particular person who was attacked?
I think you'll find, sir, that there will come a time when black people wake up and become intellectually independent enough to think for themselves, as other humans are intellectually independent enough to think for themselves. Then the black man will think like a black man, and he will feel for other black people. And this new thinking and feeling will cause black people to stick together. And then at that point, you'll have a situation where when you attack one black man, you are attacking all black men. And this type of black thinking will cause all black people to stick together. And this type of thinking also will bring an end to the brutality inflicted upon black people by white people. And it is the only thing that will bring an end to it. No federal court, state court, or city court will bring an end to it. It's something that the black man has to bring an end to himself.
When journalists Mike Wallace and Louis Lomax produced The Hate That Hate Produced, they approached the Nation of Islam with a sensationalist lens. But beyond the documentary's alarmist tone is a very important truth. The Nation of Islam did not emerge in a vacuum. It was a direct response to centuries of slavery, lynching, and grievous racism. The anger and frustration that were spoken of by Malcolm X and other leaders were not mere rhetoric. They were rooted in lived experiences of injustice. Malcolm X's role as the nation's most eloquent spokesperson cannot be overstated. His words, though controversial, cut to the heart of Black America's plight. "I charge the white man with being the greatest liar on earth, the greatest murderer on earth, the greatest deceiver on earth. These words, while jarring, reflected a radical truth that many were unwilling to confront. Malcolm's speeches were indictments of a society that had failed to live up to its ideals. What the mainstream media failed to address was the nature of the oppression Malcolm X denounced. From Jim Crow laws to economic disenfranchisement, the American system was built on the subjugation of black people. The Nation of Islam's message resonated because it acknowledged this reality head-on, while extreme to some. Following the documentary, some personalities like Jackie Robinson, Roy Wilkins, and Dr. Gardner Taylor voiced their concerns about the Nation of Islam's rhetoric. Their perspectives pointed to a critical divide within the black community. Should the fight for civil rights be grounded in nonviolence and integration, or should it embrace the militancy and separatism advocated by the nation? This divide was not merely ideological, but a reflection of what liberation meant for black Americans. For leaders like Robinson and Wilkins, the goal was to work within the system to achieve equality. For the Nation of Islam, the system itself was irredeemably corrupt and needed to be dismantled. Instead of addressing the root causes of racial inequality, it cast the nation as a scapegoat for America's racial tensions. We must ask ourselves, was the Nation of Islam truly a hate group, or was it a necessary response to a society steeped in racial hatred? And beyond that, how do we reconcile Malcolm X's fiery rhetoric with the systemic injustices he sought to expose? These questions remain as relevant today as they were in 1959. The struggle for racial justice continues, and the lessons of the hate that hate produced provide valuable insights into the complexities of that fight.
Text that Mr. Elijah Muhammad teaches that his faith, that the Islamic faith is for the black man and that the black man is good. He also uses the Old Testament instance of the serpent and Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and he sets up the proposition there that this is the great battle between good and evil, and he uses the phrase devils.
Yes.
And he uses it almost interchangeably and synonymous with the word snake. Now what does he mean there?
Well, number one, he teaches us that that never was a real serpent.
It was not a real serpent
that went into the garden.
What was it?
But as you know, the Bible is written in symbols and parables, and this serpent or snake is a symbol that's used to hide the real identity of the one whom that actually was.
Well, who was it?
The white man.
I want to call your attention, Minister Malcolm, to one paragraph in this column. He says, and I quote him, "The only people born of Allah are the black nation, of whom the so-called American Negroes are descendants."
Yes.
Now, is this your standard teaching?
Yes. He teaches us that the black man by nature is divine.
Now, does this mean that the white man by nature is evil?
By nature, he is other divine.
Well, now, does this mean that he's evil? Can he do good?
By nature, he is evil.
He cannot do good.
History is best qualified to reward all research, and we don't have any historic example where we have found that they collectively, as a people, have done good.
Minister Malcolm, you now in Chicago and in Detroit have universities of Islam, do you not?
Yes, sir, in Detroit and Chicago.
And you take your parishioners, you take children from the kindergarten ages, and you train them right through high school.
Yes, sir. True? From the age of 4, I think it is, upward.
And you have a certified parochial school operating in Chicago?
In Chicago and
in Detroit.
And in Detroit.
And kids come to your school in lieu of going to what we would call regular day school?
Yes, sir, many.
What do you teach them there?
We teach them the same things that they would be taught ordinarily in school, minus the little black Sambo story and things that were taught to you and me when we were coming up, to breed that inferiority complex in us.
Do you teach them what you've just said to me, that the white man is a symbol of evil?
You can go to any little Muslim child and ask him where's hell or who is the devil, and he wouldn't tell you that hell is down in the ground. or that the devil is something invisible that you can't see. He'll tell you hell is right where he has been catching it, and he'll tell you the one who is responsible for him having received this hell is the devil.
And he would say that this devil is the white man.
Yes.
Can a white man join your temple?
None have ever joined.
If one came up and attempted to join, would he be allowed to come in and be taught?
No, sir.
Why not?
Well, that's one of the reasons why most people think that Mr. Muhammad teaches hate. But if there is a rattlesnake in the field who has been biting your brothers and your sisters, and you go and tell them that that's a rattlesnake, and all of the harm that has ever come to them has come to them from that particular source, well, then that rattler will think that the warner is teaching hate. He'll go back and tell the other snakes that this man is teaching hate, this man is teaching hate, but it's not hate. It's just that when you study people who have been harmed and discover the source of their injury, the source of all of their defects, and you begin to point out that source, it's not that you hate the source, but your love for your people is so intense, so great, that you must let them know what is wrong with them, what is the cause of their ills. And this is one of the basic factors, I believe, involved when people think, or when the propaganda is put out that Mr. Muhammad teaches hate. He teaches black people to love each other. And our love for each other is so strong, we don't have any room left in our heart.
What do you think of the NAACP?
Islam is a natural religion, and it is difficult to find a black body with a white head and classify that body as something that's natural. Most organizations that represent the so-called Negro, usually we find when we study them that though they are supposed to be for us the leadership or the brain power or the political power or whatever power that runs it, usually it's the white man.
Muslim audience.
Who is his enemy? He'll say the Belgians. Ask the man in Kenya who is his enemy. He'll say the British. Ask the man in Morocco who is his enemy. He'll say the French. But the one thing that the French and the British and the Belgians all have in common, they're all from Europe. Is that right or wrong? How could so few white people rule so many black people? This is the thing you should want to know. How could so few? The white man today will tell you that thousands of years ago, the black man in Africa was living in palaces. The black man in Africa was wearing silk. The black man in Africa was cooking and seasoning his food. The black man in Africa had mastered the arts and the sciences. He knew the course of the stars in the universe before the man up in Europe knew that the earth wasn't flat. Is that right or wrong? Then if the black man in Africa had reached such a high state of civilization so long ago, at a time when the people of Europe were crawling on their all fours, what happened to make these people or enable these people to come out of the cave and come down into our civilization and take it over and hitch us to the plow? What happened? How did they do it? These are the things you should want to find out before you say hooray, hooray, hooray. Is that right or wrong?
This is the psychology of
America was deeply divided by racial segregation, and the mainstream media rarely gave black voices a platform, let alone voices as radical as those of the Nation of Islam. The Nation of Islam, or NOI, was a black nationalist and religious movement that called for self-sufficiency, separation from white society, and the empowerment of black Americans. The rejection of the integrationist approach of the mainstream civil rights movement was seen as radical and even threatening by white America. The face of this movement was the young minister, Malcolm X. The hate that hate produced was designed to expose the rise of the Nation of Islam. Wallace described it as the most startling story of our time. But make no mistake, this wasn't a neutral portrayal. Malcolm's charisma, sharp wit, and unapologetic critique of white America captivated both black and white audiences. Malcolm described the NOI's mission with a clarity that was impossible to ignore. The documentary ignited a national conversation about race and the growing divide in America. Many in the white establishment condemned the Nation of Islam as a hate group, while some black leaders distanced themselves from the NOI, fearing it would overshadow the broader civil rights movement. But for Malcolm X, the exposure was a turning point. It brought him to the national stage and made him one of the most prominent voices of black resistance. So, what do we take away from this? The hate that hate produced wasn't just about the Nation of Islam, but was a mirror reflecting America's deep racial wounds. It showed us how fear and misunderstanding can distort the truth, but it also revealed the undeniable power of a voice like Malcolm X's. Thank you for watching, like and subscribe.